So we're going to go through energy and ecosystems, so how energy goes from a producer all the way through the consumers to the end of the food chain, the food web. So these are some important terms that you need to know, some key definitions. So trophic levels being the feeding levels of a food chain or a food web. Producers being organisms that fix light energy into chemical energy, so converting carbon dioxide into molecules like glucose in photosynthesis, using light energy to do so. Consumers are organisms which gain energy by feeding on organisms lower down the food chain. Herbivores only eat plants. Carnivores feed on other consumers, not plants. Omnivores feed on consumers and plants. And saprobionts or decomposers, like we looked at with nutrient cycles, bacteria and fungi, which digest the remains of other organisms, urine and feces. So a bit of revision, if you can just pause the video and identify the molecules. Okay, so you should have spotted that here we've got a fatty acid, you've got the hydrocarbon chain, so it's a saturated fatty acid, no carbon-carbon double bonds, you've got the carboxyl group at the end of that. B, here we've got alpha glucose with a hydroxyl group pointing down on carbon 1. Here we've got a molecule of sucrose. You can see that we've got a molecule of glucose and fructose here. Could have spotted it's a disaccharide by the glycosidic bond holding them together, the monosaccharides. Here we've got an amino acid with the amino group, the carboxyl group, and the R group with the central carbon. Here this would be a polypeptide chain. And here we've got a phospholipid, so you've got two fatty acid tails, glycerol, and there's the phosphate group at the end. So all of these molecules contain energy. So between the bonds, holding them together, so these carbon-carbon bonds, the carbon-hydrogen bonds, contain energy. And when they're broken, and they can be used in respiration to release energy when you break the bonds. So use your notes on respiration as from the start of year 13, just to recap how that works. So we went through the definitions before, but just as a reminder, animals, usually consumers, they obtain energy by feeding on plants or other animals. Plants being producers, so they use photosynthesis to convert carbon dioxide into molecules like glucose, and glucose then contains the energy in the bonds, which can be used later on in processes such as photosynthesis, such as respiration. And just a quick reminder from earlier science lessons, with a food chain or a food web, the arrows always show the flow of energy. So energy is flowing from the grass into the rabbit when the rabbit eats the grass. The energy flows from the rabbit into the fox when the fox eats the rabbit. So you also need to recap your notes, perhaps from GCSE or earlier on, about energy transfers and energy pyramids and things like that. So if you just do need a recap, please watch this video link here. So the idea is that there is most energy in the producers at the bottom of the food chain, and then as you move up trophic levels, so feeding levels, the energy contained in that whole sort of population of organisms in that ecosystems get less and less and less. And that's because energy is lost in different ways, which we'll look at in a minute. So mainly through heat loss from respiration. And if it's an animal, so feces as well. So what we're mainly going to focus on, and most questions will be about, is the idea of productivity, so production. So primary production is the plants, because the plants are the first stage of the food chain. So primary production is using light energy to convert carbon dioxide into molecules like glucose, which contain energy in their bonds. But it's quite a very inefficient process. So you can see here that light energy hits the leaf. A lot of that light energy is lost as heat to the environment. A lot of that light energy is reflected off the leaf. A very large proportion of that light energy is the incorrect wavelength. It's only really red and blue wavelengths of light that can be used. Think of all the other wavelengths in the electromagnetic spectrum that's not just visible light. It's not even all colours that can be used. Some of it passes straight through the leaf without hitting a molecule of chlorophyll. And then the remaining light energy, 2 to 8%, is trapped in the process of photosynthesis, where carbon can use that light energy to convert carbon dioxide into hexose sugars. And it's those hexose sugars that will then be converted into other molecules like cellulose or starch or other biological molecules, and that makes up the biomass of the plant. So biomass can be measured in mass of carbon or dry mass of tissue per area per given time. And it's always important that you have mass per area per time when measuring biomass. So to be able to construct pyramids of energy, or to be able to work out primary production, you'd need to know how much energy has been converted into the biomass in a plant, for example, or in another organism. So to do that, you have to use calorimetry. So not colorimetry, which we've used in other required practicals, but calorimetry, working out how much energy there is per gram in a sample. And that be used. The best technique is using a bomb calorimeter, a complete sealed container, supply oxygen, and you can measure the mass of water. So you can use the formula Q is equal to mc delta T, where m is the mass of the water in the container, C is the specific heat capacity of water, so that would be 4.18, and the change in temperature, so delta T, so the change in temperature of the water. And then you can use that to work out the energy content in your fuel, or in this case, in the biomass of the plant. So we're going to look at two formulas, and these are incredibly important to remember. In a question, if you're not sure what the question's asking, but you recognise it's energy transfers, you recognise it's talking about primary production, put the equation down, use the definitions as well as part of that, and you're often likely to get at least 1 out of 2 for that. And really what you then need to do is link this equation to the question. So NPP is equal to GPP minus R, crucial equation. So GPP, first of all, is gross primary production. That's the chemical energy stored in the plant, biomass in a given area or volume in a given time. So units like this, energy per area per year. So that's really the chemical energy stored in those molecules made in photosynthesis. So chemical energy stored in glucose produced per metre squared of trees, for example, per year. Okay, so the chemical energy is the energy stored in the molecules made in photosynthesis. However, not all of that energy, chemical energy stored in those biological molecules made through photosynthesis, is necessarily available for the consumer. So plants also respire, plants also carry out respiration. So some of those, some glucose will be used by the plant to respire, and that is not available to animals to eat. So NPP is the chemical energy stored in the plant biomass after respiratory losses to the environment. And it's the NPP that's the energy available for other consumers to eat in the next trophic level, such as herbivores or decomposers. So secondary production is production by consumers. So only a small proportion of the food eaten by the consumer is then available for the next trophic level. So let's say that this rabbit here eats some lettuce, and only 10% of the energy consumed is used for growth, is used to make this rabbit grow bigger. And that's the only energy available for the consumers. You can't, if another consumer came along, let's say a fox, it couldn't eat the energy that this used in respiration. It couldn't eat the energy that was lost in the feces or the urine from this rabbit. So only about 10% of what this rabbit eats is used to make this rabbit grow bigger, is only available for the next trophic level. A lot of that energy is lost in urine and feces, so those biological molecules contained in the urine and the feces contain chemical energy, and energy is lost in respiration. So respiration will use some of the biological molecules that have been eaten, and respiration releases heat energy. It's an exothermic reaction. So this is another incredibly important equation. Again, you can put this into a question. If you realise it's a secondary production question, put the equation in with the definitions of what the things are. So N, So the net production by consumers. So this is the energy that is available to the next trophic level. So if we're thinking about our rabbit, this would be the amount of energy that might be available for the fox in the next trophic level. So I is the energy, chemical energy taken in from the food that's eaten by the animal. But that animal will produce feces, so that's energy lost that's not available for the next trophic level. So feces and urine, and also energy is lost as heat through respiration to the environment. And again, it's the same units as the primary productivity: energy per area per time. So for example, kilojoules per metre squared per year. This equation seems to have got a little bit messed up from the PowerPoint transferring over. So sometimes you'll be asked to calculate the efficiency of an energy transfer. So it's the energy available after the transfer divided with the energy available before the transfer times 100. So if you can have a go at working out the energy transfers between producers and primary consumers, and between primary consumers, secondary consumers and tertiary consumers. And the answers are over here to check that you've done it correctly. If you could just have a think after this question and pause it, why do you think that this value is lower than that value? So if you have a think and pause. Okay, so primary consumers are eating producers. So producers are plants which contain a lot of cellulose, which is undigestible by most animals. So that is then lost as feces, lost in the feces. That undigestible material is lost in the feces. It's not available for the next trophic level. However, for tertiary consumers eating a secondary consumer, it's eating more protein, it's eating more fats. They are very easily hydrolyzed and then in digestion, and then absorbed, and then the energy in those biological molecules like the amino acids or the fatty acids is then available by these consumers to enable them to grow. So lastly, could you just pause the video, have a go at this question, and then press play after you've had a go. So here are some of the answers that we've talked about previously throughout this presentation, so hopefully it makes sense.